Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about another controversy that has erupted in the Bollywood, and that is regarding the release of a movie called as Phule. So the release of the movie, earlier it was scheduled in March, then it was scheduled in April, and now it seems that two times the date of release has been extended, and I believe it is largely because of the protest against this movie and also due to the decision of CBFC, that is Central Board of Film Certification, to ask the makers of the movie to cut some scenes and to replace those scenes. So let us try to understand this in more detail. Now the context of this entire issue is that the censoring of the Bollywood film Phule, which is based on the lives of two reformers from the 19th century in India, that is Jyotiba Phule and his wife. And if you talk about this particular movie itself, it is based on the Savitribai Phule and Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. So it has led to an what we can call as unusual controversy. For example, there are many scenes on which many of the organizations have objected and they have said that it paint them in the wrong light, and that is why they are against the release. So many such movies have already been made about the lives of these two legendary reformers, but this movie is believed to be the first major Bollywood film on the life of these two. Now, overall, its original release date has been pushed twice, as we discussed before. An objection is raised by several Brahmin group who alleges that the film shows them in a bad light. So let us try to understand this also in more detail, but first let us take a look at the movie itself. Now we know that Phule is a biographical drama. Biographical drama refers to such kind of drama which depicts the correct, or what I can say as the accurate version of the life of the notable people. And if you talk about this particular movie, it narrates the challenges and struggle of the couple. We have discussed as the movie is here, the role of Mahatma Jyotirao Phule is being played by a well-known Bollywood actor Pratik Gandhi, and the role of his wife Savitribai Phule is being played by another notable actress, that is Patrilekha. If you talk about the director of the movie is being directed by Anant Mahadevan, whose image you can see from here. So if you talk briefly about why the movie is being made on the life of these people, it is because they have fought social evils tooth and nail, and they also provided education to began to provide education to girl in India in those time when it was still a kind of privilege that was available only to the male. So if you try to understand about the grounds of objection, first of all, we have discussed that it is mainly some of the Brahmin groups such as Hindu Mahasangh, Akhil Bharatiya Brahmin Samaj and Parsuram Arthik Vikas Mahamandal. These are the three major groups who have protested against the trailer, and they have filed a complaint with the Central Board of Film Certification. Now, what they have protested against, there are several scenes that they have raised objection to. For example, one scene is depicting a boy in the movie who is wearing the traditional Brahmin dress, and he is throwing dung on the Savitribai. Second, if you talk about the CBFC, it also had taken cognizance of these protests, these what you can call as complaints, and they have directed the movie makers to postpone the release and also implement several cuts. For example, few cuts over which objection was raised is to remove the words that were used in the movie. These words are Mahar, Mang, Peshwai, and phrases like Manu Dharmik Society. Also, if you talk about, there are certain scenes where untouchables are seen holding broom tied to their wrist, and this is something they had to do in order to clean the path that they walk through as per the traditions that was very widely practiced under the Peshwa rule. So it seems that whatever scenes against which these objections have been raised is not something kind of a fiction, but rather it was a reality in those times. So if you look at, first of all, the question that comes to our mind, that whether it is the fiction part of the story that is only being protested against, or whether the protest is also against the real fact. And many experts argue that the listed objections of the CBFC stand against the historical facts about the Phules. That means the CBFC is trying and is asking the movie makers to delete even those scenes, which is nothing but historical fact that actually indeed used to happen in the past. So the question is that why should Brahmin organization object to caste name also? For example, many such names that are being used in the movies such as Mahar and Mang, they have objected that such kind of caste terms, caste names should not be used. Especially the question is being raised in the context of the communities themselves have no problem by use of such name. For example, there is no controversy or there is no what you can call as objection by the Mahar and Mang community. Caste identity is basically because the use of these names become important and become important part of movie, because these identities reflected in these movies are basically the end names, and they solidify the historical identities of the caste and give credence to the movie, to the real history which the movie largely try to portray. Now let us try to understand that what do critics say, that why the CBFC cuts or the CBFC decision to delay the release of movie is something that should not have happened in the first place. So first thing is that obviously we talk about the brutal practice of untouchability. Now obviously after coming of the constitution, this practice has been made unconstitutional, it has been criminalized, but we know that in the pre-independence era, untouchability was very commonly practiced and it has existed in India in many forms through the ages. So obviously the question that arises that why can such practices not be depicted in film? Because if you remember, I told you that CBFC has asked to make a cut in the scene where the untouchables are seen to be walking in the street with the broom attached to their body. Second is that critics claim that if CBFC and the movie makers do not have freedom to depict the realities, to depict the actual true history, then obviously it will not be something that, it is not something that a democratic country should practice, because the reforms largely require understanding of our past and also requires acknowledgement of the past, even if it is barbaric, even it was brutal, and even if it's something that was uncomfortable in nature. So we need to appreciate what the Phules and Ambedkar have done to reform our society, and obviously this appreciation cannot come if we do not understand the kind of evils which they were fighting against, which they had to fight against in the earlier times of India. So in other simple terms, what we can say, that when we look at the history, either by reading the books or by watching the movies which try to depict the history, it is something that should serve as a guide for us, guide for the community to change, to learn from our past, and it should not be used as a tool to hide the sins of our ancestors. Obviously here the claim is being made that the Brahmins have participated in the brutal practice of untouchability, and this is a fact that we cannot ignore, and if it is being depicted in the movies, critics argue there should not be any issue with that, there should not be any kind of cuts made in this kind of depicted scenes. Now what are the protesters saying? Why they have said that there should be cuts made, or they have problem with the release of movie? So first of all, they claim that the facts and the scenes that is being depicted in the movie is biased and imbalanced, because it only paints one part of the story or only one face of the story. We do not want the fabric of society to be disturbed by the artistic freedom. They also have claimed, many of the leaders of the organization which are protesting against the release of movie, that if this movie is released in the original form, it can cause violence, it can turn one community against the others. That is one ground they have mentioned. Film should also show the Brahmin families who helped the couple, because they also claim that the movie is only painting Brahmins in the bad light. They are not showing those Brahmins who also have played a positive role in the life of Jyotiba Phule. For example, they said that it was the Brahmin couple who gave his house to the Mahatma Phule to open the first school. So this kind of facts should also be shown in the movies. And it was the Brahmins who helped the couple during their fight against the societal injustices as well. So many of the supporters of Jyotiba Phule was also Brahmins. So these kind of facts should also be mentioned in the movie. This is the point that protesters have tried to raise. Now let us try to understand the contribution of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule in the reform movement or the social reform movement of India. So first of all, we can understand that he was the originator of right to compulsory and primary education, which today seems very normal to us. Second, he was the founder of the first ever schools and the library for the women. Also, he was the leader of the laborers and farmers. He was the one who was vociferously proposing and has fought in the favor of widow remarriage and prohibition of infanticide, and for this he also used to run a home for the people who did not get support from the society as such. He had fought against the Brahmanical patriarchy. He also established what we know as Satya Sodhak Samaj to destroy the social and religious slavery. The entire mandate of Satya Sodhak Samaj was to ensure a society which is based on the principles of equality, where there is no what you can call as discrimination based on the caste and class. So what we can understand that out of all these spheres where Jyotiba Phule and his wife have played an important role, the most important role they have played is in the radical reform for the women's empowerment, whether it is through education, whether it is through the remarriage of the widows, and different other types of reform. For example, Jyotiba Phule also fought against the sati system, child marriage and female infanticide, as well as even encouraged the widow remarriage. So all these were something that seemed very revolutionary at the time when they used to live. Also, he has taken many reforms which was seminal anti-caste reform. For example, we have talked about the development or the origin of Satyasodhak Samaj in this regard. They also have, if talk about the Jyotirao Phule, he published a magazine in Marathi that is called as Gulangri, where for the first time he has talked about the ills of the caste system. For the first time he has talked about the how untouchability is a sin and it's not a practice in the society, why it should be barred. And at the same time, both of these couple also were the first to open the girls' school in India, and that paved the path for the women's education in the India as such. So the broad question again in the end comes that whether the cuts or the modifications that the CBFC has recommended to the movie makers of the Phule, is it justified or not? So again, many constitutional experts also argue that the objecting to Phule's release is denying the existence of discrimination in India, because discrimination is still, we have come a long way since the time of Jyotirao Phule, but still if we talk about discrimination, it still has not ended in India. Reform is something that is required and is needed continuously in India, and that is why the fight for true equality is far from over. And unless and until we achieve the true equality, we should not try to stifle the voices that raise this kind of practices that was earlier very, very common in the country. So it is essential to realize the efforts initiated by visionaries like Savitribai Phule and Jyotiba Phule, and small what we can call as the wins that we have to show here. For example, today we walk on the road and we see the small children's girls especially going to school. So these seem very normal to us, but we have to understand that during the time of Jyotirao Phule, it was something that could not have been imagined. So we have come a long way, we have come so far, but still the fight is far from over, and that is why denying the existence of discrimination in India by objecting to Phule's release is something that is not in the interest of the country or interest of the society at all. The film is just an attempt to spread the teachings of these legendary people and the values that they stood for, and that is why we should always understand this in this particular context. Also, the release of movie is coming at that time when the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly has unanimously, we can say, they have recommended that the Bharat Ratna should be given to the Jyotirao Phule and his wife Savitribai Phule. So the release of movie could have not come at a better time. So this is how we can understand this. In conclusion, what we can say is that the CBFC and the central government seems that has fallen short of the nationalist responsibility by delaying the release of the film and by asking for cuts that would not have caused any kind of violence, and also rather it would have pushed the audience to think and introspect, and it could have paved the path for the reforms as such. So that is how we have to understand this particular topic. So that is all for this particular video. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with the aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such helpful content. Thank you.